Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining Chicago Inno and American Inno for our virtual forum today, the Purpose First Entrepreneur Unicorn Success. I'm Jim Dahlke, the senior editor at American Inno and Chicago Inno, and I'm thrilled you're all here with us today. We have a great one in store for you. Before we dive in, a quick bit about us, because it's been an eventful year at Inno. American Inno has grown to more than 40 markets across the country, with more coming in 2022. And we're committed to covering and connecting local technology, startups, growth, and innovation. We believe Inno is building the strongest network of local startup and innovation coverage anywhere in the country. So thank you for following Inno. And if you're interested in the founders, startups, funding news, and other innovation insights in Chicago or across the country, visit americaninno.com to find your city. Make sure also that you're getting The Beat, which is our daily email newsletter. The Beat is the best way to stay plugged into everything that's impacting the local innovation economy. In it, you'll get local tech and startup news you need, analysis you won't find anywhere else, info on upcoming events, cool job openings, and much, much more, all in a fun conversational manner. And starting soon, we'll have a national Startups to Watch newsletter with coverage across the country, so stay tuned. Today, we will be speaking with 4 terrific entrepreneurs about how they turned their purpose into unicorn success. We're going to dive into discovering your purpose and turning it into a thriving business, how to build a purpose-first company culture, how to tap into your customer's purpose to really grow your business, and more. As a reminder to the audience, you're on mute. However, if you have questions for our panel, please drop those into the question box down below. We're going to try to address those either during or after our panel discussion. Now, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Pete Wilkins, the Managing Director of Hyde Park Angels and the author of Purpose First Entrepreneur. Pete, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Exciting stuff for sure. I first want to give a tip of the hat to American Inno and a tip of the hat to American City Business Journals for creating an innovative platform. I love the fact that we're reaching 40 different markets, from Austin to Boston, from Atlanta to Denver, from Tampa Bay to Wichita. I think the combination of local community innovation, connected locally, but also connected nationally, is a powerful feature that really allows us to, as a community, to really innovate. So hats off to you guys. Really proud to be a part of the first program that you're putting on a national level. I think it has an opportunity to really transform the way we get information in our communities and from coast to coast. So thank you very much. So who is a purpose-first entrepreneur? And I think fundamentally, that's what my book is all about. It's really digging into who that is. And at the very foundation of it, it's at the core of an individual. It's how they're built. It's what they believe, it's what they say, it's what they do, it's how they build their business. It's embedded into their hearts, into their minds, into their souls, into everything that they do. And what I've done over the last decade is I've done a lot of research. What differentiates those that ultimately define success? And at the end of the day, purpose is the exponential variable that transforms that. So I got a little plug today for sure, because today is the official release of my book, Purpose First Entrepreneur. What I'd ask you to do is make sure that you go to the website, purposefirstentrepreneur.com, or to the link that Kat will drop in. What I've tried to do is make sure that this learning is accessible to all. So for the Kindle version, it's less than a cup of coffee. If you go to my website, there's a free version of the workbook. You can go through that without even getting the book. Together, I think they're really powerful. But I think what we're trying to show is how you can take your purpose and turn that into a successful business. And we go through the steps and guide you through the steps of how to discover that purpose, how to found a business, how to ultimately bring that business to life in a way that's powerful. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to not necessarily talk about what we have in the book, but more about how we have 4 incredible entrepreneurs that have turned their purpose into a thriving, successful business that has reached unicorn level of success. And I think what they'll tell you is that their purpose has probably driven them through many setbacks, which kept them persistent to achieve their objective and their goals, but more importantly, to be able to connect them with the customers they serve, with the team that they lead in a way that really transforms who they are and the way that they change the world. So with that, I'd like to do a round, and I'd ask my panelists to join me. If you guys can turn your videos on. What we'll do is I'll have you each do your own introduction. We'll start with Godard, we'll follow with Jason, we'll go to Divey, and then we'll follow up with Kristi. So that way nobody's talking over each other. You guys kind of know the routine. I'll hand it over to you, Godard.
Thank you, Pete, for having me. I'm so excited to have your book launched today.
I love it.
So honored to be here with you. Yes, honored to be here with you today and these my great fellow entrepreneurs. And but I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years now. Started building my first company way back in 2000. And G2 is the third company I've built with what I like to call my entrepreneurial family. And at G2, we really have a dual purpose. One is to build a very conscious company with a peak culture that allows myself and our teams to thrive and to grow to the next professional peak. And secondly, at g2.com, we're really building the place you go for software. So, for example, if you're looking for amazing marketing software, you're a small business, you'll see thousands of happy reviews of ActiveCampaign. And we have Jason right here who started that company. I'll let him introduce himself next.
Awesome, thank you. And no, just excited to be part of the group here today and to talk about things, and a little bit of a different path perhaps, but has been building ActiveCampaign since 2003. So it's been a long journey, if you will, but one that I think only I was able to maintain by having some deeper purpose beyond just like revenue or something like that. And for us, it's very much being customer first, and also helping from a small business and up standpoint. So looking forward to discussing things deeper with everyone.
Thanks, Jason.
Awesome. And hey, I'm Divey. I'm one of the co-founders at ShipBob, and thank you for having me here. Our story might be slightly different because we started this company 7 years ago. So, and practically this is the only job I've had, if we consider everything. So, but super lucky to be in this position where we just found the right fit, right time, right market. But it all boiled down to the purpose, which we started with, because prior to this, we were running an e-commerce company ourselves, and we just realized we couldn't scale the company. We faced the challenge ourselves, and we decided to solve it, not just for us, for all the entrepreneurs, e-commerce entrepreneurs we knew. And that's how ShipBob was born. And 7 years later, we're working with more than 5,000 e-commerce entrepreneurs and helping them scale so they can focus on their purpose and not worry about logistics.
Awesome. Kristi, I know you're last, but certainly probably the best. So I'll hand it over to you.
You say all the right things. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. I'm super excited. So I'll start out just giving a little history without going back too far. So we actually launched tastytrade in 2011, but have been around the trading and brokerage industry for decades prior. But we sold it this year in 2021 in just over 1 decade. Over that time, we built 7 companies within our company. From a media firm to a new brokerage firm to launching a new futures exchange last year during the pandemic. But all of that aside, really at the core, we built tastytrade with the purpose to empower people like you and me to take control of your finances. So to learn how to maneuver the financial markets, to feel more confident, being a self-directed investor, we wanted to make trading and investing fun and actionable and really more approachable, breaking down those complex concepts and giving people the confidence to invest really their own money. And now we're doing that by sharing our know-how with the world for free. And we're now in over 190 countries with tastytrade, which is our content and shows. And then we're expanding our reach with our brokerage firm, Tastyworks, beyond the US into Australia, and with more countries coming down the pipeline later next year. So now we're empowering people around the globe. But on top of it all, and I have to say this out loud, we love what we do every single day. So definitely purpose-led, but we're deeply entrenched in what we do and what we deliver for customers. So thank you for having me here.
Yeah, well, awesome. Well, I think the reason, it's number one, I got places to visit because all of you guys have offices internationally. And so like, I got a warm spot whenever the seasons change in Chicago. For those that don't know me, my name is Pete Wilkins, and clearly the author of Purpose First Entrepreneur, but I'm also the managing director for HPA. We're one of the most active early stage investors in Chicago. We have a portfolio of over 50 companies. I've invested over 70 over my time. And before that, I was a part of several startups, many of them successful, also did a turnaround for a private equity firm. So operationally, I'm really in tune. But what I will talk a little bit about is I was just intrigued in my quest to really figure out what differentiates entrepreneurs and how do they fundamentally drive success. And what I want to make sure before I get going, success is going to be certainly defined by the success you have from these 4 founders, which clearly have met a level of success that in our world, unicorn status is unbelievably impressive. And I will just I'm going to say double click. I'm only trying to say it this one time. But the thing that you'll find in this panel is that the success that we're bringing to discuss comes from different angles. Like Divey had explained, this is the only job he's ever had. And then we look at Jason, who has taken this business over decades to become what it is today. And Godard, who's actually done 3 different companies successfully. And Kristi being really aligned with what she's done with different financial tech plays focused on the retail investor. They've all come about it a different way, but they have success to share with you. And I think what they will come, and you'll unpeel a little bit, is that the success that we'll share fundamentally stands on purpose and the values that they build their businesses around. And I think that what I fundamentally look at from an investor perspective is that where is value created and how do you scale value? And it's usually when entrepreneurs can identify a pain or a need and solve it. And that fundamentally is purpose that's being driven inherent to who they are and what they're building. And so those that have blessed us with your time for us to explain this, I think you're going to learn a lot of lessons. And I will tell you, this stuff is not soft. Like a lot of people will say, well, purpose, all this stuff. But if you're not in tune with it, I believe fundamentally, you might achieve material success, but you'll probably struggle in many other ways. And getting that foundation, both individually and organizationally, becomes critical. So that said, you guys have a lot to live up to now, but I know you can do it because I've talked to you and I know many of you for a long time. What I want to dig into is, like, I think that sometimes purpose is not discovered by you. It's actually discovered, it finds you. And so that you might be, there's a big opportunity that you see, or there might be something intrinsic that comes from your parents or how you've been focusing on something you have done in a way that creates this insatiable desire to kind of build something around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Jason, because I know your story and how you've told it to me, which I kind of chronicled in a recent Forbes article. Kind of starts with your parents to a certain degree. So I'll hand it over to you, Jason.
Yeah, and I like how you put it, of like not necessarily going out and trying to identify like what is the big purpose going to be for the brand, but it sort of comes to you, right? And so from a young age, both my parents had small businesses. And what that also meant is I was helping out with them. I was kind of involved in seeing like what they were doing, the care, the level of touch they had for the customer experience and whatnot. So as I started to think about like, what do I want to do? And that revolved around either art or something engineering related. And it led to, I want to build something that helps businesses grow, save time or whatnot. But I did it through that lens of small business, because by seeing them work on their businesses, try to grow it and whatnot, so many things were not given to them. So many things were not accessible to them, whether it be tooling, funding, all these different things, right? And so it wasn't the obvious, like I didn't have something in my mind, like this is the purpose of ActiveCampaign day one, but it just started to build over time. And then so as we brought on our first customer, which was a scuba diving company in Mexico, just total random customer that we found online. And we weren't really ready to actually deliver the software and had to figure that out. But we started to like think of, okay, now how do we grow the business? And everything was designed in a way, all the advice out there and whatnot was, let's move up market, right? Like focus on bigger accounts, you get more money, all your metrics like make more sense and whatnot. But every time I've thought about that, I've thought of like, okay, then I'm just going to abandon not only my customers that help me with this journey, but then also my parents, kind of like oddly by design, right? Like, and so like that didn't feel right. And so that's been something that's just growing over time, I'd say, as something that's far more important. And it's this piece that allows, I think oftentimes purpose and uniqueness and differentiation can kind of go together, and that can create powerful things that are sustainable over time.
You know, I think that really touches, and I remember having a conversation with you over lunch and you explaining kind of your journey first time we met. And I think that, you know, that was before you had all the accolades of what you now have, of how committed you were to solving that customer's problem. And I think a lot of people will hear something like this, and being as, you know, humble and soft-spoken as you are, like from the first day I met you, that was core to what you did in the evolution of your business.
Yeah, and it's also like with purpose and like with that focus, like it took time. Like, and I think, but that's the difference between having something that's locked into purpose versus just locked into growth at all costs. And so, yeah, like while today it looks like, oh, that worked out really well. For the first 10 years, we went from 1 to 8 people. In 2016, we're only 20 people, and today we're over 1,000. Everyone likes to look at like the end result versus the like, you know, it was just as important to me when we had, you know, 20 customers coming in a month to be able to deliver upon like finding value for them versus like the 160,000 customers we have today. But time is okay, I think, is the other piece. And I think that's like maybe a controversial thing for like some people in market and whatnot. But I think that allows you to really refine and create something different, differentiated.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that speaks to, you know, something that I talk about in the book too, is I think you're going to choose what kind of funding you want, because the more funding you take, the more pressure you have. And that it does create some pressure around time. And I think that, you know, that is something really thoughtful because you have different components. Godard, I know you've taken funding and you're going to be able to talk to this as well. We won't get into funding. So like that is something that I think there's plenty of books about funding, and my book definitely talks about it. But I think that speaking of funding, which goes back to finance, which goes back to write down your fairway, Kristi, you know, you told me, you know, when you're looking at how did it find you, I think there's 2 ways. I mean, you guys are passionate about what you do. Your environment is sensationally a lot of fun, you know, everything tasty. But like you love it to, or maybe you describe how your purpose came about. I was going to actually lead with an answer. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, sure. Probably the best way for me to encapsulate it is that we're traders ourselves. So we are the customer. So we've been in this industry for, like I said earlier, like for decades, and we've seen what's missing for the everyday person to enter the world that we love, the world of trading. And so we really aimed everything we do at supporting people that are ambitious and have a desire to learn and enter our world. So we took a hard look at the industry, and one of the biggest problems was that, you know, finance and fun together are really an oxymoron, and I say that all the time. But we love trading, but too many people find it intimidating or boring or time consuming. So we've worked to minimize those, breaking down the barriers, like I said, to enter that world of self-directed investing. So we built a community of minded people that want to be challenged, that want to learn. And that's, listen, that's something exciting to wake up to every day, like something with real purpose that you love to do. And, so did it sort of find us, or did we find it, or did we shape it? I think it's just that we lived it for so many years. We were able to see what that white space was, what was actually missing.
I think that, and I think that speaks very well to something that I even highlight in the book, is I think there's an element of finding something you love or you're passionate about is important. And you're also speaking about finding something you're good at, which you currently are. And then you touch on like empowering the retail investors to generate their own wealth in a variety of different diverse backgrounds is a powerful thing right now. And you look at kind of what I think are the core elements of that. It's loving what you do, being good at it, and making a difference. And that can be big and small, and we'll get into that a little bit. Now, Godard, I'm going to come up to you. I guess it's probably the screens. I don't know how it's around everybody's, but you're on the top left. So I am going up the ladder. And, I think that what's interesting that I'd love for you to share is, you've successfully exited 2 businesses before you started G2. One sold to Salesforce, one sold to Oracle. You as a leader, a lot of people just kind of kick back and say, I'm done. You got into G2. And I think that, from my view, you've evolved as a leader. And maybe you could talk about how that evolution as a leader has evolved, how that's present in G2, and maybe how those values really have created a way that there's a different approach that you probably have taken now than you did when you first started.
Yeah. Now, in my first company, I think it's called Big Machines. I started when I was 27. And so frankly, at that time, it was more just kind of adrenaline and excitement. And frankly, I didn't really know what I was doing. But my first company was also inspired by my father. He ran a small manufacturing company. It's a little bit like Jason. So I grew up around an entrepreneur. And that company was all about helping him sell his pumps online. And they were complex configured pumps. But that was a long entrepreneurial struggle. We started way back in the .com era. Frankly, 3 years in, we were almost bankrupt. So it turned into a very hard journey and felt more like survival. And eventually the cloud came along. We partnered with Salesforce, with Oracle. The company was acquired by Oracle, so it turned into a big success, but it was many years of struggle. And then before starting the second company, we actually started G2 and Steelbrick kind of in parallel, our second and third companies. But when we started G2, I'd had a little bit of a break. I'd exited as CEO of my first company. And I had, some time to really just think about what do I really want to do. And it was an interesting time because we got in some liquidity, and I think my friends, and I was living in Lake Forest at the time, but they were like, hey, why don't you just chill out? Everything should be great. But a few months after I stopped working, realized I was kind of depressed. My wife was asking me what's wrong with me. I wasn't getting out of bed in the morning. And I realized I just really missed entrepreneurship. I really missed having a team, having that daily purpose of building something together. And so then I got together with 4 of my teammates, friends from my first company, Big Machines. We decided, hey, let's build something else. But when we started our second company, G2, we first thought about the culture and the purpose. And I met an entrepreneur, Chip Conley. He'd started a hotel chain, Joie de Vivre, which was very successful. Also, he was the head of hospitality for Airbnb later, so great entrepreneur in his own right. But he was also very thoughtful, and he wrote this book called Peak and talked all about how do you create a peak culture. And core to that was creating a culture where your employees have meaning. And so when we started G2, I sat down with my founders in my basement. The first thing we actually talked about before we talked about what's the product, we talked about what's the culture. And we decided we wanted to build a peak culture where we could find meaning in our work, and also we can get a company where our employees would be really inspired and seeking to climb peaks every day. And so ever since then, we've been seeking to build this peak culture that delivers meaning to our employees and also really delivers exceptional experience to our customers, so that our customers, truly become evangelists for our products.
I think that is very nicely said, because you had a moment to pause and reflect. And you also had some experience to reflect upon, which many entrepreneurs in the audience don't have. And many of us don't actually pause and reflect on our decisions in general. I think that is something, as I evolved as a leader, has been critical in my ability to actually perform better. And I think that what I would often bring up to those that are exploring being an entrepreneur, like what we're trying to do, or what I am trying to do, is to take the lessons that I've learned, and there's plenty of data to show how purpose transforms performance and results. But to think about, how do I build this culture around those that we are serving, our customers? And that could be clients or traders, merchants, whatever you're going to call them. But fundamentally, you serve them with purpose to create a bigger good. And that could be small, it could be a mom and pop boutique business, or it could be the businesses that you guys are building, but it's very critical. But I do think there's patterns and routines, and I talk a lot about that. But it comes from the heart and the soul. A lot of people think it all is about the mind. And Divey, you know, I know that, like, when our journey's kind of been together a little bit. I can recall, like, small office growing bigger office, and you know, you talk about passionate. I would love for you to talk how you started in the streets of Chicago, which may sound bad or good, but it clearly really resonates, how you started to connect with the pain points of the people that you serve and how you built around that.
Yeah, so the pain points of people we serve, as Kristi said, you have to feel those pain points yourself to a certain degree. So before ShipBob, me and a longtime buddy of mine, we started a company where we were essentially doing e-commerce business ourselves. And every single day when we would get an order, we would go stand in line at the post office in the basement of Willis Towers, now Willis Towers, earlier it was Sears Towers, and we would spend hours standing in line because it was just so long. And that just wasn't scalable. And when we started talking to people while standing in line, turns out they were also e-commerce entrepreneurs. And that's where we wanted to just solve this problem for ourselves, but also all these people standing in line. And turns out everyone was struggling with shipping and logistics. So like, okay, how about we just ask them what kind of solution they want, and we'll just build it for them, because we're engineers, we can do this. That's something we're really, really good at. And we want to solve this problem. So let's just put 2 and 2 together. And that's how we started the company. The moment we launched, we knew we had something going, because all these e-commerce entrepreneurs flocked towards us once they learned about our services or our product, that, hey, I have this pain point, and they showed immense trust in us. And ultimately, the bigger thing was the common connection and our understanding of their pain point, where they want to spend time on building their business, growing their business, and not standing in line at the post office or packaging goods. They just wanted to get it done and somehow still show their brand and be able to compete with this small company called Amazon in the end. And we just wanted to do it so that they become successful. Until this date, I think the inspiration we get by talking to these merchants and understanding their pain points, and that is shaping the future roadmap of the company. And even for us, we are becoming better entrepreneurs ourselves by talking to these people, because they give us inspiration on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that, you know, and I think probably not only does it give you inspiration, but I think it builds your culture and your company, because I think the more you can touch to that, the bigger purpose. And a lot of people, you know, discount that, I think, as a leader. Like, we're just going to build and we're going to grow and we're going to look at our metrics and our KPIs. And, you know, that becomes, especially as you scale, gets to a point where it doesn't matter. It's just a number. And if your customers, your clients become a number, the actual commitment that your employees have is measured just like that, numbers. And then it becomes what I feel is like a hygiene of management, that you're not really solving problems. But if you can create how each person is contributing to a bigger purpose, and you have to believe it, like, it can't be made up. You can manufacture this stuff for sure. But I know each of your businesses, if you guys succeed, like ActiveCampaign, it allows me to engage customers at scale that I won't be able to do one-on-one. And so I'm creating that, but I got to understand that, or the trader or the merchant or all of your software providers that are counting on you, Godard, to build this marketplace, to be able to build their business and creating the economy, I think becomes powerful. But how you translate that, and Jason, you said, you had 10 people, and I'm going to mess this up, but for snippet, 10 people in 10 years, and now you got 1,000 people, in X amount of years. Like, how do you scale creating that connection? You guys all have that connection. How do you ultimately tie into that connection? So Jason, I guess I called you out so you can help correct anything that I misrepresented there, which I often need. I need like a course correction guy on duty. No,
it's close enough in my mind. So, but I think that that focus is one of the things that I worry about over time with scale, in terms of thinking about what are we doing for our customers? If our purpose is to help democratize the ability to improve customer experiences and whatnot, we all have to understand kind of the pieces in which we do that. And to your point, a number doesn't do it. And I would put this on myself first and not necessarily the team or anything like that. As you scale a company, it's more and more likely you're going to want to separate yourself from some of the maybe constructive or not so positive feedback or things like that and get that summary report or whatnot. So instead of that, I really try to find ways, how do we bring just raw, authentic, experiences and text from our customers to myself, but then also through the company at large. And then I think it's all about repetition, which isn't super exciting, but anytime we have a company update or whatnot, we bring out customers, we talk about their stories, less about us and the small piece we play in their world, more about what have they done? It's inspiring. The fact that we're focused on small growing business and whatnot, they're inspiring stories. It's people want to get behind them and help them, and then start to focus on how does someone in the customer or sales, all these different places interact. And we've even had it where we identify all the people that have touched a customer, and the customer might be paying $40 a month, and all of a sudden there's 20 people or something like that, and it's there's some questions about how does this work, but it speaks to the power of what we can do. And then it's all comes together, because that's where so much is going in the way of customers will share. G2 is doing an amazing job of bringing that all together and making transparency and things. So you can't, that piece on being authentic is so key. For us, being customer first is just really high up there, but also your team as well. And so as you think through all your stakeholders and how are you addressing it, that level of intention has to be there almost more than some of the things if you were just racing to try to get to an outcome, if you will.
That is, Jason, that is perfectly, I think that is so well said. And I don't think that people in the audience can, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you can fully appreciate it, but it all comes back to being authentic in what matters. And I think that's where you start to build back purpose. But that authenticity also has to be translated to your team, both good and bad. And we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But I know that, Kristi, you had definitely, your culture is about being authentic and building those relationships internally. And I know that how you incent goes beyond just monetary, but it's also rewards and so forth. So maybe you could tell how you support making sure that you're developing the culture in that way.
Yeah, gladly. So probably one of the most important things for me to share is that we run a very flat organization. And so as leaders, setting the tone for the company, I think is really important, meaning setting an example for the way that we interact with customers to start. So when I keep saying we, Tom Sosnoff and I are co-CEOs, and we both answer customer emails. I mean, we're pretty busy, for sure, but Tom spends a majority of his time on air, customer facing. He is the face of the company. And he spends a tremendous amount of time interacting with customers, answering questions. And I do the same, with different things, even different topics. But I think that first of all, setting the tone is really important. Just actually you mentioning scalability, a lot of people go, well, how is that scalable? You can't have the CEO or executives constantly answering customer emails, which is we believe the complete opposite. It is scalable because it's about building the culture of people putting the customer first, that is what is important. That's the reason we're there at the end of the day. The other piece of that is teaching that every customer is equal, whether they have $200 in their account or 2 million. Like, no matter their size, it's about connecting authentically with them as a person, not measuring them on how much money you can make off of them or whatever, right? So what we have done is again created that culture where this is just about authentic interactions and connecting with people. So we don't incentivize like on number of calls you make or emails you answer or chats you answer or anything like that. We don't monetize, we don't pay like monetary incentives for hitting certain numbers. What it is that's more around recognition when they've done certain things, and that it really is always sort of this collective pool of how well the company does, right? Yes, on your individual contributions, but we want to make sure we're incentivizing around, did you do the right thing? Did you, were you focused on the customer at the end of the day? So, but yeah, all about authenticity and meaningful connections. I think that really matters, and setting the tone and an example for, to create that culture. So it is scalable.
Yeah, and I think that, to speak to some of the things, I use the word purpose pillars, which are kind of your core values organizationally. I use it kind of the foundation of what I believe you have to actually navigate good times and bad times. And what that allows you to do is to make really good decisions because you know what your values are and what your purpose is. And I think that what you're saying, Kristi, and what I'm hearing from Jason and others is that, if you know what your priorities are, then you can make the decisions. Your decisions can actually reflect it in a result. That result can be measured on the outcomes you get. You got to adjust. I will tell you, and what you're saying and what I'm hearing, like Jason, everybody's devoting time to engage with their customers. What that allows you to do is to make that decision, shows your behavior. That becomes how you'll lead through your culture. Your culture is your behaviors. It's not what you say, it's how you behave, and your purpose pillars do that. I think one of the biggest things too, and I know Divey, you will speak to this because I know it's one of your values. Resilience is something that is, and I think you have a great call out, and I'll butcher this out, so you'll have to correct me, but it's like the best view is like, what is it's the best view, the hardest part of the journey. What, you give it to me, it's your resilience. I have it in my, I don't know where it's at, but it's basically meaning like after you climb, like getting up to the top of the mountain, which I've done, like that is the best view. And it's scary as shit when you're trying to get up there. Sometimes you feel like you might fall, but when you're finally up there, you enjoy it so much more. And having others around you that have taken that journey, that is magnificent because you bonded together. So resilience, I think, is one of the biggest benefits, one of the biggest values that creates from being focused on your purpose. I know it's a core value in your organization. Maybe you can just speak a little bit on how you communicate that. I know it's even part of your all hands meetings. Like, not only do you tell them about how great, because things have gone good for ShipBob recently, but things you got to address as an organization.
Yeah, so being mission driven and being resilient are two of the 4 core values that we have. And they all center around our merchants in the end, because our merchants, these are entrepreneurs that are building their own businesses, and they're not often venture funded. So it's very hard for them. So we wanted to make sure we keep that spirit alive. And how we actually codified it was back from our own experience. And Duke in the chat also put a blast from the past photograph here on the link, where we were convinced that we are building the right solution for e-commerce entrepreneurs, because we faced the problems, we knew people needed it. But when we actually launched the company on day 1, we had 0 orders come in. 0 people signed up because no one knew about us. And that was probably the most disheartening thing ever, because we worked so hard being engineers. We spent nights, weekends, you call it, we barely slept to build the product. And ultimately, when zero orders came out, we could have given up that, hey, this idea doesn't work. But we had the conviction and we had that mission and purpose in mind where we have to deliver best-in-class logistics for these e-commerce merchants. So what we actually did was, instead of giving up, we became what we were. We went back to the post office, started outside of post office for 3 straight months, pitching to every single person coming in whom we could understand was a business, and would just pitch that, hey, why are you going in the line? Give us your package, we'll ship it for you. And like Duke caught a photo from the audience here, but there were instances where we were literally, it's -20 outside and we're still pitching to customers because we knew these people needed it. And in a matter of 3 months, we went from 0 to close to 200 customers, 200 e-commerce merchants using us on a daily basis. And then it kept scaling from there. Now, it wasn't scalable to do it at the beginning, but it was okay completely for us to do something that didn't scale in the beginning, to talk to customers, to learn from them. And the feedback that we got from the first few customers shaped the entire roadmap of ShipBob. And it's still helping us shape our roadmap for the future.
You distracted me by telling me to look at that picture. So I looked at the picture. Is that Drew is that like a captain's hat, or I'm uncertain what is it that he's wearing there?
Well, it's a captain's hat, and
I like that.
Wear it to catch attention. But unfortunately, this was in front of Lincoln Park Post Office in Chicago. Funny story, but quick one. We were actually chased out of that post office and drove, and in fact, even I am banned from that post office because there's something called postal police that actually took our name and ID down, that we can't be soliciting people in front of the post office.
I love the postal police story too. That's great. Well, I think that a couple of things from a time perspective, we're going to dig into, and we're going to do a little switch, but before we switch, because I want to talk about performance next, and that will be our segue into a transition from a group perspective. Kat, what we'll do, and give me a thumbs up or whatever, would you like us to take a few Q&A at the end? I think that's kind of our plan, so I'll kind of tam around that. The next 30 minutes or so, I kind of want to dig into a couple of items, but before I do that, I think the conscious leadership, which really parallels, purpose first, is something that you have kind of certainly built your thinking, hired talent around. Godard, would you mind just providing the audience a little view of how you look at that and why that makes a difference in your organization?
Yeah, no, and I am a big fan and student of conscious leadership, and I work with a conscious leadership coach, Sue Outrunner, who helps me get better every day. But I first discovered it while building my first company, Big Machines. And I joined this organization, YPO, Young Presidents Organization, which, by the way, I highly recommend to any of you young up and coming entrepreneurs. But through that, I joined a peer forum. And frankly, as I mentioned, building my first company, I was just filled with anxiety and fear. I remember my company felt like a storm cloud of anxiety in my forehead, where I was always afraid my father was my first investor. I was afraid I was gonna lose his money. And I went through a lot of hard times, and I had to let people go. And I was afraid I was gonna ruin my friends' careers. And so it was just a very anxious journey. And I couldn't really enjoy my life during that time. And then I met through IPO, I met this conscious leadership coach, Jim Dethmer, who started this whole movement. There's a website, conscious.is, but really to make leaders more self-aware. And I think then when we started G2, like I said, we started at luxury, we had a good exit. We had some money, so we could be much more thoughtful about our purpose, much more reflective. And we said from the beginning, hey, let's build consciousness in. And I think that is, and now we train all of our leaders at G2, but it does start with meditation, self-awareness, and being reflective about yourself, being self-aware, which allows, I think, you to be both a better leader at work, but I think it's also, I don't know if my wife would agree, but hopefully makes me a better husband, a better father, because as I've found, as I'm self-aware, both for myself also, that storm cloud of anxiety goes away, and I can be much better at connecting to people, whether our team, our customers, my family. And so it's a journey I'm really enjoying.
Yeah, I think and that is something that I really try to drive through in the book, because here's the secret that I think you guys will all nod your head. I mean, like, it doesn't ever get like easier. You don't have fewer problems, you got different problems. And the reality of it is that you have to create a mindset. I call it the purpose first mindset. I kind of look at it, you have focus, like, you got to do this, awareness, there's change, I got to be aware of what that change, how does it impact my focus, and then mindset. And I know a lot of people think that's like, I gotta psych myself up. And I would actually say, what are my biases that are influencing my thinking that allows me to make decisions, and how I scope that out? What I've seen, and what I spend a lot of time on this, is that getting that your head right through conscious leadership, meditation, prayer, walks in the park, jogging, whatever it may be, being aware that you have control becomes really important. And I think that it also becomes important in a sense of, does success bring me happiness? I will tell you, it certainly will be, it's great to have success, but then you're going to have another problem on another day that's going to then consume your head. And does failure ruin me? And I'll guarantee you, you will get up, and I will talk about personal and professional failures that I've experienced. You come back to the center. And that center is, you have the opportunity to control it. And I think that however you get there, that allows you to have the mindset to make the best decisions for you around your values and what's important, and hopefully as a leader in your organization. So I don't care what form it is. And Godard, I know that, what you have told me, I'm completely aligned with. There's a lot of different flavors of how that is ultimately, and I think that I speak to those elements, but the whole thing from a leadership perspective, purpose plus your values plus good decision making, it's kind of probably going to transform your business, but your life as well. So I don't mean to get like super deep into that, but I'll tell you, like, at the end of the day, you entrepreneurs, if you're going to lead a business, you make a lot of decisions. Being aware of how you make those decisions becomes important, and how you look at it.
And I would say, I think I agree with everything you said. And I think that's, some people ask why build a third company, but I think it is also an amazing opportunity for personal growth. Because you are always challenged, there are always problems, but I think you can really grow as a person and learn. And that's what I love. I still learn a ton every day.
Yeah, I think it's a journey of life, and the businesses, like, I think entrepreneurs are more of an archetype. It's not an occupation, it's a vocation. It's about building something that's possible. However you get there, it becomes, like you were saying, like, it gives you the power to be more, to do more. But if you don't get it right on yourself, it's a pretty shitty journey. And so, like, you got to get that right. And I really speak to that, because I think at the end of the day, you're actually going to be better because of it. And it's hard. Like it is hard to be a good husband. It's hard to be a good friend when you have all these things. But long story short, those are all critical. It's probably, really important to look at from your overall foundation of what your priorities are and how you're making decisions all the way around. So, I could go on and on. Matter of fact, I wrote a book about it. I go on it. And it's amazing. It's not like 3,000 chapters. For people who know how much I talk, they're probably expecting much bigger. So that said, as committed as I am to understanding your purpose, what I often find is that gets confused with performance. And like, some people like, well, I'm just doing good, and if we just do it all and everybody's good, kumbaya, like, it's just everything will happen. And I will tell you, when I say happen in a good way. It doesn't work out that way. And there's a lot of great leaders that have great ideas with 100% commitment, that their businesses don't work. And there's a variety of reasons sometimes. And if you look at it, you'd be surprised how many of those are actually around circumstances that are outside of their control. They might have put themselves in a circumstance that wasn't the best one to be in, maybe the industry or what they're doing, but the likelihood that they would be successful, looking at that and your performance, and I have a whole kind of pattern to think about that. But at the end of the day, you have to perform to hit your goals in order to achieve results, to drive your business. And so when sometimes leaders are thinking about it, if I tell somebody that they're not doing a good job or they're not meeting their overall objectives, then I'm not necessarily buying into the bigger picture. And my view is that purpose intersected with performance drives results. And those results, many times, if you're effective, will actually, especially if you look at how you can drive that, becomes instrumental in the results you get. So from your perspectives, I would love to know, because this is like having accountability for doing your job in a purposeful environment is important. How do you communicate that? And Godard, we'll start with you, and then we'll kind of roll around. But I know that you ask people to take ownership of what they're doing and how they do it. So maybe you could provide a little more thoughts around that.
Yeah, and especially with our leaders, I think we're working towards called freedom and responsibility culture, where leaders do have freedom to shape their teams, they're part of the company, but they also have the responsibility to deliver the results. And I think one of the methods we use a V2 MOM, which has the values very much like your purpose pillars, and we have our peak values, but then it also has our methods, which is what are our key initiatives that we're going to drive to achieve our vision every year, to achieve our purpose. And then we also define measures or metrics, how we measure that. And I think that to me is one of the best ways to set the accountability. And no, you don't always hit your goals. And frankly, as an entrepreneur, I remember my first 6 years, my first company, I never hit my sales goal. Very depressing. So it took me 7 years to figure it out. But
that's good stick-to-itness right there.
And the purpose, I think, is what gave us the resilience to not quit, because we still believe, but that was hard. But I think it's also just making clear now that you have a bigger company and we have 500 people, but that everyone also knows what are they accountable for. And I think having a measure of that, are we achieving our initiative, I think is important. I think like Kristi, I don't necessarily believe in always tying your comp to it, but being very clear, hey, what is the key metric? With it, customers, it could be, hey, is it NPS, is it customer satisfaction? Are they happy? That'd be one great measure. And so we make sure every team, every leader has clear measures with clear goals. And then, we review that every month, every quarter. And then, we know where we're standing and are we achieving the results we set out to achieve or not? And if we don't, we learn from it. If we do, we also learn from it and see how can we go even faster.
Yeah, I think that, that is, I think measurement becomes a critical factor in success. And I think that what I would love for a little bit more expansion on, from your perspective, Jason, when you look at measurement, how do you infuse it into your organization and how do you tie it to purpose?
Yeah, I think it's intertwining that measurement to the purpose. In our case, it's not easy, but it's a little bit easier because we're focused on customer experience platform, customer experiences, and small businesses being so important. So obviously, like the goal is not to get to 100 customers with greater revenue, but like we have our eyes set on like how do we get to 1 million growing businesses that we're helping. But the thing I'd also add is like the plan and the measures and whatnot. And this sounds obvious, but like I'll elaborate on it. Like has to be just for you, meaning just for your company and just for your team. And obviously that's the case. But like what I mean by that is it's less looking at market, less looking at competitors, things like that, to try to devise what you're going to do or how you're going to do it. The benefit of not necessarily just doing that compare and trying to match market is all these little things that'll happen that'll create some of that anxiousness for yourself, your team and whatnot. You see like, funding rounds, you see like different competitors that seem like they're doing really well and here or there or whatnot. You start to think of like, no, our path, our purpose is more centralized around what we believe in. And that is something, if authentic, isn't something that like can just be like taken away or adjusted by a competitor, right? Or by a market condition or whatnot. And I think that allows a business to be able to go through the good times, but also, like you said, like there will always be like ups and downs within every year, day, probably hour. So like I find that to be helpful as well.
I think you touched on it and you said it in a rhythm that I don't think everybody would fully appreciate. Or at least I probably wouldn't if I was in the audience. But once again, that's more of a statement about me than the audience. But the idea of you're defining success of the growth of your customers. And I think what you said, which I think is like, I would tell every entrepreneur to think about this, is defining what success is in your organization for your customers that everybody here has said that's driving is critical, because then everybody knows how to achieve success. Those measurements should result from that. Am I paraphrasing that accurately, Jason?
Yeah, well put.
Awesome. So, I think that in that, I am going to kind of circle, Divey, we're going to come back to you. I'm going to go to Kristi next. Kristi, I think along those lines, like we all adjust, right? So like this continuous, and I call it a purposeful improvement loop, like what's your purpose? How are you evaluating, adjusting? And I know that some of your reflection on when you look at your performance and what you do, maybe if you could say this, give some insights into that, and also how that kind of translates to your team.
Yeah, boy, how much time do we have? Okay, so.
All right, well, you can pick one of those, or you can
No, here,
if you have something that you really want to hit on, by the way, because I know that we have like 11 things we're going to talk about. We probably hit 3 right now. So if there's something you'd like to spend some time on, please do.
Yeah. So, so there's a lot. So I'll try to answer this actually in a sort of a 2-part way. Just on the quick note about measuring, I'm a numbers person by nature, and I believe that you can't change what you don't measure, and that is definitely important. But talking about the mindset of employees, and yours, of course, too, as a leader, but you need a mindset of the employees that they care, that they actually, care at every level of the business, about the customer, and ultimately about the customer experience. And the reason I say that is because that translates into performance, and it translates into results, is around making sure that if they're all focused on the customer experience, that loyalty, that think about yourself as a customer, right? Using any company or any product, you walk away with a customer experience that is like off the charts. It makes you feel like you matter, like you're connected with, with that company, with that product, with that person you spoke to, and you tell all of your friends when you have the opportunity to. So that word of mouth marketing is so powerful, and it translates to results. So that's just one thing I wanted to say that is just so important, because again, if you hire people that care or have that mentality, it's an amazing domino effect in a good way. But you talk about accountability for performance, and even performance as a leader. And I have this natural, I'm very self-aware, but I also have this natural routine of reflection. And not only reflection, but reaction and action from that. So I always, in most situations, and maybe this is just a self-critical type of, analysis, but I'm always asking myself, like, how could that have gone better? Like, how could I, as a leader, even have helped or set somebody up for success better and taken some kind of action? I mean, it could be something as simple as being in a management meeting and maybe somebody's presentation didn't quite go as well as expected. It's sort of like I walk away from that going, okay, I'm responsible for that in some way. Like, I could have helped them do something better. Like, I need to actually own responsibility around that. So I usually end up reaching out to them and just say, hey, so, let's, here's something else we can try next time. I want them to always feel like they're not alone. Like, everything they do is really ultimately a team effort. And so when we talk about, accountability for performance, again, I think it starts with the leader in setting an example that this is not just everybody being judged within the company on their own performance, but that everything we do is a team effort, and it really should be about bringing our heads together, no matter what department you're in, no matter what your role is, net, anybody from anywhere within the company should be helping to just, raise the tide. So hopefully that sort of answered your question.
It's awesome, because I think I'm gonna kind of summarize it, because it goes back. I mean, it's the why, it's our purpose.
Yeah.
And when the leaders have clear purpose, they communicate that to the company. And if the purpose is around the clients, then you can define what success is based on that. And when success is known by everyone, that can be measured, then you can deliver that success or not. And your business is going to show the results.
Mhm.
And so that's where the why and the pillars and the process and the decisions made, this is why it difference. I mean, you guys, and what I want to just we've been in all panels. I've been to a lot of panels, and you have different people that are represented on those panels. Some not as far as long as you have in your businesses. But for those that are in the audience, all of these folks have achieved, startup success. Clearly, I know we all have things that we want to keep on building on, but there's an element. So I think that you can see this is so true, because you guys are all speaking the same thing, a little bit differently, but aligned the same way. And truthfully, I know I knew all of you. I know you guys have touched each other because you're in Chicago, but international. But you can see this is something that's pretty powerful throughout, that's consistent, a common denominator. So that common denominator today is, going back to your purpose is really around helping your customers. Is there like one story from a customer or merchant perspective that really was an aha, or maybe a couple that you could provide in a short period of time that would really crystallize some things that you think about?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many merchant stories, because some of them shaped our story way back in 2014 when we were just starting out. And some of them still very recent on how we think about our business. And a lot of this ultimately turns out to be what these merchants are going through and how we can enable them to be successful. So one of our merchants is Touchland. It's a hand sanitizer company. And if you guys haven't tried it, it's the most premium hand sanitizer you can get at not a premium cost, because it smells so good. It's almost like a cologne or perfume, but it's actually a hand sanitizer.
That's perfect. I can do multiple things with it. It's multifunctional.
Exactly. So, they were doing really well pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, and suddenly their product was in demand, and the demand went through the roof. But their supply chain wasn't built to suddenly have an overnight demand. So at that point, the struggles this entrepreneur went through from manufacturing, and then there were bans in Mexico for essentially getting hand sanitizer into the US. And we essentially stood by this merchant and came up with different solutions on how to essentially get the product. It wasn't part of the product roadmap for ShipBob, and this is not what we do on how to get product from overseas, how do we truck within the country, but still learning from them how they're struggling and just helping them gave us a sense of purpose, which is essentially what our mission statement was. And we did whatever it took, and ultimately they became successful. Post-COVID, they're doing really well. And we're reaping the benefits now for all the bending over backwards we did. By the way, ShipBob, BOB stands for bending over backwards for our merchants. So essentially, we did all that, not for revenue generation purposes. It was just to help them. And now with their growth, they're logged in as a true partner. And now we're reaping the benefits from them. So that's why it's a longer term play. Even if you grow revenue, all these metrics can be measured, but sometimes you just have to fall back to why you're doing it. And that translates into longer term value.
And I think that everybody here can also, is if you're helping them, they're helping all of their clients, and the amplification of that purpose does change the world, hands down. So the last topic I'm gonna spend time on, and I think it's something that's really, I'm committed to. In my book, I talk about how I ebb and flow of being focused on really making sure that I am in the right position to make the best decisions. And I talk about this idea of being a startup athlete, because it's much greater than, you know, how we look at it in the way that we perform at work. As you guys are under a spotlight, and that spotlight of being a rapidly growing company. I mean, it's like being a professional athlete. And I will tell you, probably was even more pressure about when you were younger, when you actually had your parents' money or whatever it may have been. That has the same pressure. It never goes away, it seems like. So there's a certain element that I spend time on, is how do you look at things from a startup athlete perspective, which I think builds some things to really consider. But I would love for you to share how you emotionally, physically, mentally recharge, spend some time. It can be one, it can be all, it could be just connecting with the right people to have the right relationships, which, you know, I think is really critical as well. So I will start with Kristi. We'll go with you first, because I think we started with you last. We did, matter of fact, I made that comment. So we're gonna start the last question with you.
Okay, so just talking about training and being an athlete, like, first of all, I love that question, and thinking how you train, how you recharge, how you do everything you're doing. So I love that, just because I'm an athlete myself, so I can totally relate to it in those terms. I think in talking about training like an athlete, I want to talk about that first in terms of our product. One of the things that anything you want to get good at, anything you want to do, you should practice, right? You should prepare and you should practice. And so, like, our motto at tastytrade is, trade small, trade often, to practice and get comfortable trading in the markets, right? So there is, and I do that with anything I want to get good at. And, whether I'm training for a race or whether I'm doing anything, it's about preparing and practicing. But I love one of the things in your books, talking about that professional athlete and talking about attracting, great fans, and the idea of that. If you create that community, you surround yourself with people that you all feed off of the same energy. If you all sort of are attaching to a purpose, and that is, if you're in that community, you feel like you're bigger than you're part of something that's bigger than yourself. And there is something that is energizing about that. So making sure you're in that scenario, not surrounded around negativity. And if there is negativity, I am a firm believer in addressing it right away. I'm okay with conflict, like healthy conflict, but squashing that negativity is so vitally important, because there's just no time or room for negativity. It is truly about forward movement and learning and positivity, actually, and just continuing to learn. But it's so I think that when it comes down to building that culture where you can thrive, where everybody can thrive, it's a domino effect. It's about, if you create that right environment, it is going to be where everybody is feeding off of all of everybody else's energy and positivity. That's probably the best way that I can say it.
So I think that is a great thing to double click on, which I was going to do, because I think I used the word startup athlete. I mean, it could be whatever it is. There's an element you have to have an approach. So it could be in a theater, whatever analogy you want to use. But I will tell you, there is all the evidence in the world. If you surround yourself with people that don't believe in you, so that's personally, you're never going to achieve what you can achieve. So that's like great fans are really important. Getting rid of toxic relationships, really important. Organizationally, if you think that you don't have support for what is building, that can turn into a cancer. It really can, and you have to address it. You have to hear it out. You have to be thoughtful. And then you have to decide, because you need everybody to be in line with that. That becomes really powerful. But I think from a personal standpoint too, and this goes back to the individuality of this, is like, I went through some personal dilemmas, some trauma myself, both younger and recently. Like, you don't nurture your relationships, whether it's bad news or good news, you won't have those people there, and you need them for both. And so, you know, there's an element where you got so much going on as an entrepreneur. You're like, I'm going to meet up with my friend or my family member later. Figuring out what your pillars are and giving a little time throughout that process becomes real part of that nurturing from a startup athlete perspective. So with that, that kind of opens up, because I definitely, Kristi, thanks for teeing that up. And Godard, maybe I switch up to you and give a little perspective on how you look at that.
Yeah, and thank you. I think Kristi said energy, and she has a lot of energy. So I imagine my story is you probably take good care of yourself also. And I do think that's key to being a startup athlete, being a leader. I find, you know, taking care of myself mentally, physically. And so I do, you know, I meditate every day, and I try to take an hour for physical activities. I do love climbing real peaks or going on bike rides, runs. And so those are my passions, and that really clears my head and puts me in a position to perform, you know, at work and be better with my family, better with myself. So that's really important to me. And I would say, you know, for different people, different passions. Other people might be playing music or, you know, but I think that taking at least an hour in a day to take care of yourself, I think is really critical to then put you in a position to perform in the rest of your life.
And I think you'll see that evidence, you give yourself that, whatever it may be, your ability to recharge, recover, and make better decisions goes up substantially. So Jason, I'm going to hand it to you, and you get a choice. You could talk about something personal or something professional that you might even do for your group that enables them to recharge, or for you.
Got it. That's a tough one. I think I agree with so much of what's been said. And like, I think I don't see myself as like a good, like starting point of like, this is what to do. I feel like I'm just constantly learning in terms of, by default, I'm far more self-critical, and we could have the most, you know, good things and momentum going on, and I'll be focused on that thing way off into the corner or something like that, of like, how can I fix that as well? And I think what people have already talked about in regards to just like allowing that time and space to sort of, I like what Kristi was talking about in terms of reflection and whatnot. I think you can treat things like that as like beating yourself up, or you can treat it as like, if you authentically were trying to do what you could, like, what can you do going forward, and having more of that forward-looking mindset. I also think like if you start with the kind of going back to like, I think all too often times entrepreneurs beat themselves up about things that are not in their control. It's market, it's competitors, it's raising, it's valuation, it's all this stuff that is like, maybe it actually is meaning something, and half the time it's probably not, right? And so by starting with the fact that like a lot of people don't have it figured out, a lot of people are on all these different journeys, but all the more reason to give it time, to give it attention. So I think in addition to like having time to like do something else outside of work to try to clear your mind, like allowing that time to like reflect and think, and whether that means it's like a coach, or you just put like a rock on your desk and talk to it every day. Like, it's just like allowing that time to unpack things and think about things. In terms of recharging, absolutely agree with trying to get out of just kind of the work mindset all the time. But at the same time, I find the ability to recharge by looking at things that go back to purpose. I go back and I look at like some of the customer stories coming out within that day, or maybe some customer NPS that's positive if I want to be recharged. Or I talk to someone that's not like someone I talk to every day. It's not on the leadership team or something, but someone talking with our customers, right? Or seeing like a situation where they've like done something. There's so many extraordinary things that happen each and every day when you have so many customers. That is just so recharging. It brings it back to that purpose, and that purpose can't be necessarily just moved away from you. And then the last thing I'd say is, I think all of this is applicable from kind of the entrepreneur or founder lens and whatnot. But I always like to stress, like, that's everywhere. Like, if you're in a fast growing business, That's not just, I don't think of it as just like I'm going through something or my leaders are going through something. Everyone is going through continual change. Everyone is going through an element. So if I find a tool or if I hear of a tool or something, like how can we incorporate that and bring that throughout the entire team as much as possible? And I think that's the powerful way of, because it's they're all different journeys and whatnot, but what I found is like that level of anxiety, like, that can form around different things and whatnot. I'm not that unique compared to, most people at ActiveCampaign. It's different versions and whatnot, but together we can work on whatever that is to help keep moving it forward.
I think, thank you for providing that perspective. And it's amazing. I would say this to founders in general. There's often a focus on what I did wrong versus what I did right. And I think that is something you got to get in your head a little bit to reward yourself around that, because that is, as we all know, like that is something that has an impact. We can go on forever. And I think that, it's also, I look at it kind of like a football analogy, which I tend to do that from a sports. It's like, if I got a fumble in one game, that's okay. If I fumble it 3 times in one game, or I fumble it in every game, then I got a problem, I got to correct it. But one fumble in one game doesn't cost our team the championship. So I think that sense, but I will tell you the thing that I created this equation called the performance equation. There's an element called circumstances and all the layers of circumstances, how it impacts your performance. And I really encourage everybody to kind of dig into that, because it really helps people take the ownership of what they can control and also an understanding of what they can't control. And I think that becomes like when you really, like when I lay it against all the different things and leaders of anything, organizations, political, nonprofits, like you have to look at the circumstances that you are operating within, that you've been dealt, to really evaluate your overall performance. And sometimes you got to just shift those circumstances and where you are, and sometimes you can't. And it's being aware of that. But I think that helps us make sure that one fumble doesn't kill us, but maybe we just end up determining how do we switch that performance by maybe going to a different sport too. So Divey, that we are going to give you, I will say you got one, we're going to answer a couple of questions. We're not going to have you, unless you want, one parting comment that is like your golden nugget. Like this is like the ounce of wisdom around purpose that you have. I know a lot of pressure. Anything you'd like to say before we answer a couple of questions?
I think that, well, the golden nugget, or essentially one of my own personal values, they all go together, where I've always tried to surround myself with people who are better or smarter than me. Like back in high school or like even middle school, I was always trying to understand, if I'm, let's say, second ranked person in the school, what does the number one person do differently? And what can I learn from that? And that humility, or just that ability to learn or understanding my shortfalls, helped me a lot, even to this day. Like I'm trying to surround myself with people who may not be in the same field, but they're excelling in their own fields, in their own way, and just learn from them, like what is different about them, what makes them special, and just learn from all these different people who are maybe really good at music. I don't need to be good at music, but what drives them, that purpose or that why behind fuels me, and understanding that why is the key. And that is essentially the biggest thing that I would say is like, once you get into that, like you'll find your own why, and that drives you forward, and that gets you the purpose.
Well, I will tell you, that was a golden nugget to kind of seal the deal without a doubt, because I can't, like, I talk about that for sure, but knowing what you're good at and what you're not, and you get a choice. Do you want to get better at everything, or do you want to surround yourself with people that are good at those things? And that is a great debate. That is excellent. That is a good way to summarize it. And before we move over to questions, I encourage everybody to go to purposefirstentrepreneur.com, or for those that can't spell entrepreneur like me, which should never have named it, but purposefirst.com will get you there as well. We get you the workbook, which is free. we'll take some questions. Kat, I'm going to hand it to you to moderate those. Does that sound fair? And you're on mute, so if it's not fair, then I can take. All right, great.
Surprise. Okay. So I'm just going to go to a couple that just came in the Q&A box. One came in kind of early about culture from Sam, saying, you know, wondering what you all think about this. Culture is foundational through ups and downs. Strategy is circumstantial based on changing competitive environment. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And then Sam's asking, you know, how are you intentional about keeping your culture, which I think you guys pretty well answered, but do you have any other thoughts on that?
Okay. Kristi, did you want to go?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Did you want to go first?
No, I was gonna fill the void, but you stepped up, so I will let you.
So here, yeah, the only thing I'll sort of add to that, I think it, first of all, is very true. And part of that comes down to the mindset of your culture and what you've built there, because they're going to be resilient. They're going to bounce back. They're going to figure it out, because strategy does change. Your environment does change. And so it's really about building and bonding with people so that you can lock arms and address whatever's going to come your way. Because you know what, when you look at strategy, like in building a company, nothing is linear. It is all over the map. And if you build the right culture with the right people, you're going to be able to tackle anything.
Awesome. Kat, back to you.
Okay. All right. So, you know, I think this could be for any of you. Jennifer is asking, you know, what are you guys planning, I guess, just broadly in 2022? So any big plans on the horizon?
Wow. That's a loaded question. You guys don't have any big plans going on, do you?
Maybe just like
At least 50% growth on every metric.
Maybe maybe just one highlight thing that from a customer perspective that you're hoping to deliver, maybe expanding or a new offering or maybe each of you kind of a little sales plug of like what's in store would be probably what I would like to hear if I was in the audience. So actually, I'm as a part of the panel, I'm curious.
Sure,
Anybody want to take the lead on that?
Yeah, I'll happy to try that. So yeah, I think for us, like we solve for businesses across all different verticals and whatnot. So we're really keen on how do we personalize our own platform experience and customer experience more completely to not just the vertical, the locale, but also the maturity level of the sales or marketer using the platform. And I don't think of that as just product. That's also on our customer facing side, how we sell, all sorts of things. For me, that's a really exciting piece where we can really grow quite a bit.
No, I'll jump in right after that too, just sort of building on that. One of the things we're focused on for next year with being acquired this year from a company that's out of the UK and that is global already in 17 different countries, IG Group, we are super focused on our data internally and laser focused on that customer journey now that it is outside of just our ecosystem here within the tastytrade ecosystem. It goes above and beyond that. And so as we expand internationally, we are again locking arms with IG on what is that customer journey now? How does that look different? How are they going to experience this differently? Even though it still comes back to trading the US markets, it's from a different country. You may be sleeping while our markets are open. I mean, there's a lot of focus on, yes, international expansion, but way more focus on what is that customer journey look like.
Awesome. Godard, how about you? Or Divey, you're going actually. Godard, you're going to be last. So this is Divey. You like the last couple of questions. You were last, so I'll hand it to you.
Awesome. Yeah. So for us, like we enable e-commerce merchants with a click of a button to be able to provide 2-day delivery across the country. What we want to take that to the next level is next year, which is we'll take them international. So if you want to have same day, next day delivery in the UK and Australia, we'll enable the merchants with a click of a button to do that. And second, we'll invest a ton in making sure we represent their brand. So if these merchants want their own boxes, own inserts, customized stuff, we'll make that happen for them, even though it'll cost us some efficiency. But again, going back to the purpose, we'll do it so that they get better customer experience and they're able to present their brand to their customers.
Awesome. Godard, you're last.
And I mentioned we want to grow 50%, but I think an exciting new product we're doubling down on next year is G2 Track. And the core G2.com is a software review platform, software marketplace. But with G2 Track, we're allowing CIOs, CFOs that buy hundreds of SaaS apps and cloud services to track all their SaaS. And then it allows us to give them benchmarks in real time, both to see, are there some of their apps that maybe are wasted spend? And then are they also missing other apps in their stack? And that will also allow us to help software vendors make them better offers. So really excited about G2 Track.
Yeah, and so since we have 2 minutes left, I'm gonna, Kat, we'll take some of the questions offline.
There's two that I think would be really good for the audience, and maybe you guys could answer them in like 1 or 2 sentences as best as you can. But somebody had asked earlier in the chat about kind of where, like where can you go to get help and support with your startup, peer mentorship. I know Godard mentioned the YPO, and then you also had shared the EO Entrepreneurs Organization, but are there any other places that you would suggest that founders can kind of go?
Well, this is like $2.99, but it's in my book. Like there's a whole list of starting it up just so you guys can tell them, but I would just say there is like a nice little list of stuff. But to that, just real rapid fire on that, because there's a lot of different places to look.
Okay, super helpful. Okay, the other one was
Kristi, did you want to add though? I was just
all I was going to do is do a plug for female entrepreneurs. And just saying that when you look at Chicago, there's Chicago Innovation, co-op for women mentoring in 1871, and there are so many organizations, and Pete's got a tremendous, call it directory almost of places that you can go. But I also think that even, and not that I want to serve everybody up, but you guys can always reach out to us too. We're happy to connect you with people.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, one more quick one. So Jennifer had asked, she asked, do all of your employees know the company purpose? Which I assume from this conversation, yes. But I think one thing that I think would be interesting is, how do you, I guess, communicate and like share that purpose with employees? Is that part of, daily communication? Is it something with onboarding? Like, how do you, keep that purpose kind of top of mind?
I would say, in addition to like onboarding and whatnot, all too often, I think it's like taken for granted if it's just like out there a lot. So I think of it as something to measure as well. So like when we have our annual plan and whatnot, we're looking for like measurement of maybe it's someone that can share a customer story or share a customer story with someone else and whatnot. So finding ways to make that measurable with scale, I do think is important, in addition to just like continually driving back there. And if it's authentic, it certainly will help as well.
I also think that in just your daily conversations with people, it's an amazing opportunity to sort of drive it home. Don't assume they know it, can recite it. You can find ways to insert it into your two-way conversations with people, no matter what level they are, and constantly explain sort of the why and how it fits into your vision in casual conversations. And I think that I've found that to be incredibly powerful. Don't ever assume that they know or how to make that connection. We all sit at the 30,000-foot view to a degree. They don't have that benefit of seeing all of the different working pieces. So you constantly sort of making connections for them with articulating it in different ways and applying it to their everyday job I think is important.
And one of the things I'll add, just because I know we're on time and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, is I had the opportunity to write stories in Forbes on our panelists, and tastytrade is in the works, but for G2, for ActiveCampaign, for ShipBob, they really dig into how that is being done too. So there's actually some more depth that you guys can see on that. But I think Kristi hits it on the head though. You got to be able to communicate it on a consistent basis every opportunity you have. And it's the one thing you can't say enough is around kind of what your purpose is and how you're serving a greater purpose, for sure. So Kat, let's from an overall perspective, any questions that you think we should cover, I will answer them personally. I'll connect with these guys if need be to make sure that we do that. But I wanted to definitely, I want to thank the panelists. You guys were gracious with your time, really thoughtful, and from a leadership perspective, I think you're providing us a lot of opportunity to see how to really incorporate purpose into our companies, into our lives, and to making a bigger difference. So much appreciated all the way around. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kat,